Okay, so get this. Park Avenue gets to keep its name, not because hundreds of Montrealers took to the streets.
Well, it is because Robert Bourassa's son said his father wouldn't have liked it. Today we'll talk to you about activism.
And if anybody's still paying attention.
My name is Awakiwe Lolo.
And I'm Emma Legault.
Coming up in the show, do demonstrations really work? And what's happening in Darfur? And do people really care? 4 years ago, we witnessed the largest anti-war rally in history.
A single weekend, 800 cities, and up to 30 million people, all against the impending war in Iraq.
The demonstrations inspired the term second superpower, referring to public opinion.
But just how powerful can protesting be? With this report is Norhan El-Hakim.
How can we trample the civil liberties and human rights in a place like this in Canada?
Cries of outrage in the face of injustice. Demands for change. Mobilizing the masses despite cold, rain, or snow. Protesting, one of our most basic democratic rights. But how exactly do protests affect decision makers?
I got the sense from my research that generally speaking, most politicians, even if the issue is on their plate, viewed protesting very negatively. It kind of contravened the spirit of good democracy.
Elizabeth Bloodgood is an expert on protest tactics and their impact on state policy. I wanted to know what, for example, this protest 2 weeks ago against Canada's security certificates could achieve. According to Bloodgood, protests satisfying certain conditions are more likely to incite some reaction from politicians.
If it's kind of on their portfolio of issues to begin with, and it's a big enough movement or a big enough act, then they'll feel some need to say something kind of probably a platitude.
The security certificate contravenes the charter.
It also largely depends on the politician. Those with activist backgrounds find it more difficult to turn their backs on protesters. Protesters, for their part, seem to disagree on whether their cries have a real impact or land on deaf ears.
They had to start talking about it before things change, so I think that it's definitely a good way to get people to talk about it and get some change, yeah.
Non, je pense pas. Je pense c'est
For
vraiment...
this protester, it's a way to show solidarity and prove we're not alone amidst social structures that try to isolate us from each other. Bloodgood agrees there is a deeper meaning.
Especially in places like US or Canada, there's a good chance that any one election, your vote is going to matter very little. People will protest as a way of saying, well, that's actually not the case. And in fact, my voice does matter, that I do have a say here, that I can indeed take actions above and beyond this voting thing to make myself heard, to make myself clear, to really have an impact.
For Concordia Reports, I'm Norhan El-Hakim.
The Supreme Court released its decision last week on security certificate, finding that the use of secret evidence violates the Charter.
But more recently, Harper made it clear that the government plans to continue to use security certificates in some form. Harper also rejected the idea of closing Guantanamo North.
My personal rights have to be invaded.
Anything having to do with our rights being interrupted, I guess.
There are smarter ways to go about things rather than just making a big scene and crazy and creating an uproar about things. I think it's smarter to work within the system rather than to work against it.
Depends how they're done. If you can get on the media and on television, then they're effective.
You don't just go about throwing rocks at houses or hurting people. That just brings about more strife. And when you do it properly, yeah, it is effective, yeah.
Over the past month, the citizens of Hérouville have been under intense media scrutiny. They put in place a controversial set of norms and standards for immigrants to abide by. Since then, they have made changes to the controversial document, but the debate rages on. Sarah-Ève Leblanc joins us from Hérouville with the story.
Hérouville is a small village quietly tucked away in the Mauricie region. The sleepy town, dominated by a towering Roman Catholic church, has adopted a declaration of norms that it says would-be immigrants should be aware of before settling in this town. While Montrealers are used to living in a multicultural society, old-stock Quebecers living in semi-rural areas are starting to fear that their culture is under threat.
You're in Hérouville right now. Can you tell us what separates Hérouville from the rest of Quebec?
Well, you know, Emma, here the population in Hérouville actually represents a large majority of the sentiment that is shared by rural Quebec. I think the problem is, the main point is that it's hard for people from urban areas to understand why there is any problem with multiculturalism in the first place. And this is the issue. Here in Hérouville, the population is 100% Francophone and 96% of them are Catholics.
So how are these rural areas being affected by the immigrant population? Does it explain their reaction?
Well, I think that's where we're misinterpreting the real problem. First of all, most likely immigrants will not be attracted to coming to rural areas like this one, mainly because the employment opportunities are extremely limited and the unemployment rate is very high. For example, here in Hérouville, the unemployment rate is 68% higher than that of anywhere else in the province. So I think it's a good example here when we're looking at the citizens of Hérouville at the fear of multiculturalism when you're looking at it from an outsider's standpoint.
Does it not also showcase the sharp division between the Montreal area and the rest of Quebec?
Well, actually, reasonable accommodation is a pretty common factor in the city of Montreal when you look at the large immigrant population and their specific needs. Actually, of the total immigrants that arrive in the province on a yearly basis, 90% of them decide to stay in the city of Montreal. So yes, there is a sharp ideological and possibly cultural division between Montrealers of all cultural backgrounds and those of rural areas.
So does this sentiment stem from the ongoing political struggle between Quebec and the rest of Canada?
Well, historically, political scientists have agreed that Canada has been composed of two cultures, if you will, that of the Anglophones and the Francophones, which we sometimes also call the two solitudes. I think we're looking at the same phenomenon here with the Hérouville issue, except this is not one of ethnicity or language, but it's rather one of a mentality of demographics. And by this, I mean that most likely the people from urban areas don't have the same priorities and the same perspectives as those from the rural areas.
So where will the debate go from here?
Well, the fact that Hérouville raised the issue a few months before the provincial elections has actually worked in their favor. A commission of inquiry has been set up in order to evaluate the validity of Hérouville's rather controversial requests. ADQ leader Mario Dumont is gladly using the heat to his advantage also. He has asked for the creation of a document to explain the Québécois cultures and values. On his side, Parti Québécois leader André Boisclair has been extremely critical of the lack of leadership that Jean Charest has shown. So basically, right now it's a no man's land, and the more debate there is around this issue, the clearer the intentions of the political parties will become.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Emma.
The Black Star Big Brother has relaunched a program that will include girls. The new director says they had to change the strategy to fulfill the community's needs. Programs include in-school and out-of-home activities. Those who want to be mentors can apply, but they have to go through the security check for the protection of kids.
Paint yourself green fast enough? Here's a few tips on how to live a more eco-friendly lifestyle. For one, if you're going somewhere close or if you go somewhere often enough, put away the car keys and take a walk or take the bus. If you have to idle your car because you can't handle the cold, remember to have your car in neutral. This way less gas is burnt. And if you're thirsty, ditch the plastic, non-recyclable water bottle and try turning on the tap. For more tips on living green, visit greenpeace.org. Some call it mass murder. Some call it crimes against humanity. Others go so far as to call it genocide. Regardless of its title, up to 400,000 people in the Sudanese region of Darfur have been killed since 2003.
But as Corey Rapkin tells us, students are doing something about it. But is anybody listening? We warn you, the images you will now see are graphic.
What could you tell me about Darfur?
About what?
Darfur.
I have no idea.
Do you know what's going on there?
No.
No? Darfur, a region in the African country of Sudan, halfway across the world. In a country torn by battles over land distribution and oil resources, a rebel group called the Janjaweed, or Devils on Horseback, have taken matters into their own hands. According to the UN, they have caused the death of about 400,000 people, the majority of that count civilians. But whenever there is a humanitarian crisis like the one in Darfur, you know there will be people pushing for the cause. Stand Concordia is a small student group composed of 10 students. Their aim, to raise the awareness of the student population.
I think right now is awareness, first of all, because so many people don't know what Darfur is or Sudan. Our main thing is actually to put pressure on the Canadian government.
Despite all the letter writing to Parliament or organized dances, Stand is yet to achieve an important task. There are still a lot of Concordians who don't know what's going on.
Not much.
Do you know what's going on there?
There's political unrest, possibly. Something like that.
What could you tell me about Darfur?
He's a nice guy. I don't know. What's Darfur?
You see snippets of it, but I think what we're not getting enough play is what can you do? Like, you know, like when we watch television, it just kind of in and out of our ears, but more as to what can you do. And a lot of people don't even know that they can even ask their prime minister, and it's free of postage, to take action.
Downey says the lack of awareness is causing the government to play a rather limited role in the region, that of peacekeeper. However, she says that a little more push by people like herself will help them play a more vigorous one.
I think that's something it should be in our face all the time. We need to be mobilized in the streets, just like how students here were mobilized for free tuition fees. I think we should be in the streets for Save Darfur.
For Concordia Reports, I'm Corey Rapkin.
The Old Brewery Mission has publicly challenged the provincial government to allocate more money in the next budget to service the homeless. Montreal only gets $5 per person per night as compared to $37 for the same in Toronto. Christian Durand says there is hope that their plight will be addressed during the elections. But if nothing is done,
that means that there will be a lot of people who are in a very bad state.
The Old Brewery Mission was founded in 1890.
Not all activist groups are as respected as Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but MAD spokesperson Teresa Ann Kramer says that MAD doesn't receive the same amount of respect in Quebec as the rest of Canada. Reporter Stephanie Sergiotis sat down with her to figure out why.
There are a lot of different activist groups that try really hard but don't always get their point across. Why do you think that MAD is making a difference?
We've worked a long time. Candy Lightner started MAD over 30 years ago in the States, and she lost her daughter to an impaired driver, and MAD started in a mother's kitchen. And we still work from our kitchens. I work from this house. I make phone calls. We meet here to discuss our different strategies and over, supper, and then we go out and each of us do the things that we've assigned ourselves to do. We have now 90 chapters across Canada and hundreds of regular volunteers and thousands of other volunteers who will donate some time to us.
Why is MAD not so strong in Quebec?
Hard to say. It's also newer here in Quebec than in other parts of Canada. It started first of all in Ontario, and there were more chapters there. And again, it's very difficult to get a foothold here, to have people recognize MAD and to have them take this crime seriously. You know, our motto says that we want to stop impaired driving and help victims of this violent crime. It's not perceived as a violent crime. It's perceived as an accident. Even the media refers to it as an accident. The police often refer to it as an accident. It's not an accident. It's a violent crime. And I think that's one of the battles that we have here in Quebec. It's not perceived as a violent crime.
Why do you think Quebec doesn't take drunk driving as seriously as the rest of Canada?
I think it's a cultural matter, and that it's very ingrained in our society here, that it's just something that everybody does. And since everybody does it, your brother, your father, your mother, your son, your daughter, these are not criminals. These are not bad people. These are not murderers. These are not people who go out and kill other people. It's just accident. And that's a very hard concept to bring across here in Quebec, because, as I said, Quebecers seem to think that it's the hardcore repeat offenders that are the bad guys responsible for all these deaths. And they don't want to accept that even one beer can impair you, and that after you've had a few and you're on the road, and even if you're a family man or a mother, that you can kill somebody.
You mentioned that the media plays a big part, and sometimes in Quebec, that they don't always take drunk driving seriously. How do you think the media portrays drunk driving in the rest of Canada?
No, I didn't mean that the media does not take it seriously. The media is a very, very powerful force. I think the media is the only voice that our victims have. They don't have a voice in court. The victims don't even get to make a victim impact statement in court. And the only place that they have a voice is through our media. It's just a very, very difficult battle. It's very hard to convince people that it's a crime. That's the hardest thing.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time and speaking to me.
Thank you very much.
When it comes to taking action, not every case is simply right or wrong, and some issues come with emotional baggage. How important is the State of Israel to the Jewish identity? As Ida Jorgensen reports, feelings run high when Palestinian and Jewish Canadians join forces against Zionism.
Come rain, come shine. Every Friday for more than 6 years, the organization PAJU for Palestinian and Jewish Unity has been stationed in front of the Israeli consulate in Montreal. For nearly as long, Friends of Israel has had their own counter-demonstration on the other side of the street. One side is calling Israel an apartheid state, asking the Israeli government to respect Palestinian human rights. The others say Israel is a force of peace in the Middle East, protecting itself against terrorist attack. Although they're ideologically opposite, both demonstrations were started by Jewish men. Brian Katz from PAJU says he never doubted Israel's intentions growing up. It was simply not an option in a Jewish household.
It was simply something that was not questioned. It was the victim and never the victimizer.
Since then, he's changed his mind, now seeing Israel as an aggressor against the Palestinian people. Edmund Silber, on the other side of the argument, thinks Palestinian human rights are respected and that PAJU's argument should be seen in a more sinister light.
They are using the same techniques of the Nazis, repeating a lie sufficiently often until people start thinking it is the truth.
Having lost touch with several family members over his support for the Palestinian cause, Katz has heard the argument before.
It's the blind leading the blind. What can you do? And if you criticize Israeli policy, you are making a statement against Jews, and that makes you, if you're a non-Jew, anti-Semitic, and if you are a Jew, a self-hating Jew.
In his opinion, the closeness between the Jewish identity and Israeli politics is exploited to further the Zionist cause.
It's an ultra-nationalist movement. It has nothing to do with Judaism, and the distinction needs to be made between the two.
So is the Zionist worldview too closely associated with Israeli politics? Or does Silber believe it is possible to retain a Jewish identity and disagree with Israel's actions?
It is possible, but to deny the right to exist of Israel is not to be Jew, is to take yourself out of the Jewish people.
In reality, both groups favor a two-state solution. But echoing Israeli politics, they disagree where the line should be drawn and what it would take to obtain peace. And until that day, both groups promise to keep voicing their opinions week after week. For Concordia Reports, I'm Ida Jurgensen.
So how do you know that somebody out there is listening?
I guess you don't, and maybe it's falling on deaf ears. But I mean, at least you'll know that you've done your part and you've spoken your mind.
Well, I guess that's it from us today. Thank you for watching Concordia Reports. I'm Awa Kiwelolo.
And I'm Emma Go. Many organizations try to help Africa by sending money, but one underground Montreal initiative is empowering Africans with information. With more is Awad Logo.
A program formed to resist South Africa's apartheid regime, the Group for Research and Initiative for the Liberation of Africa still operates despite the end of apartheid. In 2006, Grilla won the impunity case of former president of Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, almost 20 years after his assassination. Aziz Fall is a member and says that decision is important.
And by doing so, we will have clear messages to the other African countries that you cannot just kill.
From a Montreal office, the organization informs Africans on self-reliance, ecologically sustainable development, political and human rights, among other things. Besides internet, ideas reach people through trade unions, political parties and guerrilla collectives.
We need an organic intelligentsia in order to make changes.
Grilla also produces the Amandla radio show from Montreal and Toronto. Gwen Schulman has been with the show for over 17 years.
And to give a perspective that really emphasized progressive struggle on the continent, that there were people on the continent who were organized, who had new and exciting ideas about how to turn around historical injustices that had led to the poverty and the conflict and the famine.
Next in the agenda, to mobilize people and denounce NAPAD as another program to benefit the West and scrap Africa of its resources. For Concordia Reports, I'm Awa Kiwelolo.
So Awa, does this organization only concern people in Africa?
No, they actually give information to also people outside, whether Africans or North Americans, to break the negative stereotypes that have been built in the mainstream media about Africa. You know, they want to show that there are people in Africa who are changing things, who are in developmental programs, or who are really having a positive impact for the future of Africa, not just people from the West who are coming in to help Africa.
Cool, thank you.